Welcome to the Unit 5003, Managing Logistics and Technology, and to this particular module, which is Managing Operations. In this module, I'd like to describe the operations function, how it relates to other business functions, and how it's evolved over the years to the point where we are now. I'd also like to discuss how and why businesses operate globally and the importance of globalization in supply chain management. We'd also like to cover how to calculate and interpret productivity measures used for measuring competitiveness, but also to understand the importance of effectiveness, efficiency, and equity when considering public service operations. We'll discuss the importance of operations in supply chain management to a firm's strategy and the process of developing, aligning and deploying strategy throughout the organisation. So what are operations and what is operations management? We can see from this slide that operations management is the activity of managing the resources which are devoted to the production and delivery of products and services. So it's about the design, the operation and the improvement of productive systems. Those productive systems can often be described as an operation, that's a function or a system that transforms inputs into outputs of greater value. And a value chain is a series of activities from suppliers to customers that adds value to a product or a service. The transformation process is a series of activities along a value chain extending from supplier to customer. Activities on that chain which don't add value are superfluous and should be eliminated. Transformation process itself can be physical, so it can be equipment, it can be tools, energy, skills being used to transform raw materials into finished goods. The transformation can be locational, using vehicles to move goods from one place to another or from one storage depot to another. The transformations can be ones of exchange, where the ownership of a good or service is transformed from the retailer to the customer. There can be physiological transformations, where people themselves are transformed from being ill to being well, for example, in a health service. The transformation can be psychological, where people's feelings or emotions are transformed by a musical performance, entertainment generally. And the transformations can be informational, where data is transformed into information and information into knowledge for the use of people and in business systems. We'll look at a few examples of operations that we might experience from time to time. Here are some examples of operations. The back office of an operation of a bank. We're more likely to be customers in a bank, relying on the integrity of the back office operations and on information accuracy. We're dealing more and more online with them rather than in person, and we rely on them to look after our money. In retail operations, where our personal presence might be necessary to smell, to feel and to touch the products we exchange for our cash. A manufacturing unit is an operation which may be largely invisible to us as customers, but again, like the bank, where the quality of the final product produced by the operation is crucial for us as customers. In a takeaway or in a restaurant, transforming the raw food materials into a meal which is safe and satisfies not just our physiological hunger, but also, in the case of a restaurant, to meet and exceed our psychological needs for a high quality environment in which to socialise. All of these are operations, or the sum of many transformational operations which have the same characteristics. Any operation can be described as a transformation process of inputs to outputs. The basic diagram here shows that transformation of some of the inputs of materials, machines and so on through transformation processes into outputs of goods and services. Here are some of the functions that operations perform. This can range from organising work, selecting processes, arranging layouts, locating the facilities in an area, designing the jobs that people have to do, measuring performance, controlling the quality of the product or service, scheduling the work that needs to be done, managing inventory, planning production. IKEA is an international operation based in Sweden, retail operation, which deals mainly in household goods, which can be flat packed. They are high quality in production and design, and IKEA now tries to have operations in every country in the world. It's an international operation. So here are some of the operations, from designing a store layout which gives smooth and effective flow, ensuring that the jobs of all the staff encourage their contribution to the success of the business, to continually examine and improve operations practice, to monitor and enhance the quality of services to customers, to arrange for fast replenishment of products, to maintain the cleanliness of the store and the safety of the storage areas, to site the stores, locate them in an appropriate size and the most effective locations, and to design elegant products which can be flat packed efficiently. These are a number of operations at IKEA, which range across from design through to delivery to customers and post-delivery service. This diagram illustrates the central role that operations plays in interacting and integrating with every other function of a business. There are multiple interactions taking place, interactions with finance to produce budgets and forecasts and plans, interactions with marketing to produce delivery schedules, forecasts and feedback from customers, interactions with human resources to acquire required skills and abilities of staff, to conduct performance evaluations and appraisals, to satisfy legal requirements in relation to human resources and safety, health and safety. And interactions with suppliers to produce and receive raw materials, delivery schedules, quality requirements, and product and service designs. Lots of interactions that operations and their management is central to the business operations of any organisation. In this diagram, we consider the relationship of operations to some of the other core functions of a business from their perspective. So, for example, from a marketing perspective, the task in the operation is to identify the needs of its customers. From an accounting and finance perspective, it's to raise the capital required to do business. From a product development perspective, it's about developing the product or service from concept through to design and delivery. And product service operations, where the operation makes and distributes the products and the services. So some examples here of different kinds of operations and different kinds of organisation. So for example, in a church, there are several operations in force. From a marketing perspective, it's calling on newcomers as an operation. In accounting and finance, managing appeals for money is an operation. For product development, an operation might be to retranslate some of the scriptures from some of the basic ideas and concepts. And in product service operations, conducting weddings and services is an operation, set of operations. In a fast food chain, advertising on TV is a marketing operation. In accounting and finance, paying suppliers is an operation, and in product development, designing the hamburgers or the food that's being served is an operation. And in operations themselves, the product and service operations, making the hamburgers and actually serving them in the store is an operation. And from a furniture manufacturing viewpoint, the marketing operation might be how do we sell to stores and making those sales pitches and so on. In accounting and finance, paying staff is an operation. In product development, in a furniture manufacturer is designing new furniture. And in service operations and product operations, assembling the furniture itself into the final product that can be displayed is an operation. All of these are operations that can be described using the transformation process that we described earlier on. The kind of service or product that we're required to deliver will have implications for the type of operation that will be needed. This diagram summarises 4 key dimensions which define a typology of operations. This is not covered in the textbook that's recommended, but these considerations are really important when deciding on the type of operation that will be needed. It is covered on the other textbook that I recommended earlier on, Slack et al. So what does our operation look like in terms of volume? Volume can be low or high. If the volume's low, then there's likely to be low repetition. Each staff member will probably perform more of the job. There'll be less systemization, and there'll be fairly high unit costs. If the volume of your product or service is high, then there usually is high repeatability. There's usually specialization in terms of staff. It will usually be capital intensive, and it'll have relatively low unit costs. The second dimension or type of operation is that of variety. Where there's high variety of product or service, then the service or the operation has to be flexible. It's usually quite complex and complicated, and it's delivered to match customer needs quite specifically. Usually there's high unit costs involved in that. Where there's low variety, then the operation is usually well defined, it's usually routine, it's usually standardised, and it's usually regular in the way in which it's being delivered, and it usually has low unit costs. Variation in demand can be high or low. This can be seasonal, for example. So where the variation in demand is high, you need rapidly changing capacity. You have to anticipate what the demand is going to be, so a lot of attention is given to forecasting. Where variation is high, you need to be quite flexible as an organisation, and you need to be in touch with demand. You need to know what your demand is going to be or try to predict it fairly accurately. Usually it involves high unit costs. Where the variation in demand is low, then usually that's quite a stable operation, fairly routine, predictable, where there's a high utilisation of capital, and you've got low unit costs. The final dimension that I want to look at is that of visibility, and that can be high or low as well. Where there's high visibility, then usually there's a low tolerance for waiting, of customers waiting in line. The satisfaction is usually governed by customers' perceptions of the service that they're getting or the product that they receive. Customer contact skills are usually needed where there's a highly visible operation. The received variety is high, and there's usually high unit costs. Where the visibility of the operation is low, there's sometimes a time lag between production and consumption, so you can store things. There's usually high standardisation, low customer contact skills are required, and there's a high staff utilisation. Business can get done out of the sight of the customer. Usually there's high centralisation and relatively low unit costs. Just note from the diagram that the volume scale has low on the left and the other's got high on the left, because usually high variety, variation and visibility are associated with low volume products or services, but not always. Because of these implications, it's important to understand where an operation is positioned in terms of the 4 V's, and is it where the business wants it to be. Here are a couple of examples. Next slide. Here are examples of 2 quite different organisations, operations in the hospitality business. The Magusi Safari Lodge or camp is a high-end, top-end luxury accommodation and experience marketplace. Very expensive, very targeted. So the Safari Lodge has got relatively low volume, high variety, high variation, and high visibility. Formula 1 Hotel is a budget hotel mainly used by business people, where there's a little cocoon room. It's very small, there's very few people interactions with staff as you enter. It's mainly automated. Here there's relatively high volume, low variety, standard room, low variation in demand, and low visibility. Very few people involved in the delivery of that hotel service. So it's important to understand how different operations are positioned on the 4 V's because their implications might well be different. Is the position where they are, where they want to be? And does the organisation understand the strategic implications of being positioned there in terms of the 4 V's? This diagram summarises how operations management and operations strategy fit together to deliver added value for the customer. Looking at the diagram from the right, customers and their demands and their requirements will drive the organisation, the company, in its choice of competitive position. Operations have a role in delivering that competitive role and position for the business. From the operations understanding of its competitive role and position, it can develop strategic objectives for the operation and the sub-operations or the small operations that are required to deliver that. Those three things of deciding on the operations' competitive role and position, the strategic objectives, and the kinds of operations, the choice of operations to deliver that, is sometimes called operations strategy. In terms of delivering that, that means that operations themselves have to be designed, they have to be planned, they have to be controlled, and they have to be improved over time. And that's sometimes regarded as operations management, the design, improvement, and planning and control that provide the operations and the output and products and services for customers. At the left-hand side of the diagram, we can see that the inputs that go into that transformation process to produce the outputs is made up of two types of resources. There are those resources which are transformed. The materials, the information, and the customers themselves may be transformed by the operation. And there are transforming resources. The facilities that are available, the staff, are resources that are transforming, that help to transform the materials, information, and customers. It would be quite important to distinguish between transformed and transforming resources. And there are feedback loops involved here from one end to the other. So customers will feed back to the organisation and to the operation those areas that need to be improved. The operation can then do that, and the customers themselves can feed back through the facilities and staff information that they need to make choices and decisions and so on. So there are feedback loops involved throughout the organisation, feedback and feed forward loops throughout the organisation. The question is put in the textbook, how does operations and operations management relate to my major subject in my degree programme? I think it's been fairly clear that operations interacts with every other function of the business, whether it be accounting and finance, information technology, marketing. Then operations management, production and service operations management interacts with these core internal functions of the organisations. Also, I think you'll be able to see that each of the functions themselves have within them operations that need to be designed and managed and controlled. And so understanding operations design and management is central to the way in which these can be performed. And so no matter what your career choice or your degree programme, operations and operations management is really important. This slide illustrates some of the key developments in operations and supply chain management. That's the way products and services and the transformation processes have changed over time. The textbook goes into some detail in each of these, and just want to work my way through them. So, in the 17th century, most of the products that were being produced were delivered through craft production, the process of handcrafting individual products, specifically for individual customers. This was followed by the analysis of jobs, where jobs were divided into a series of small tasks, where each were performed by a different worker who became very skilled in that particular task, sometimes called a division of labour. The standardisation of parts that enabled mass production was the next phase in that development, where interchangeable parts could be produced and used to mass produce finished goods. Scientific management was developed by Frederick Taylor. This was a systematic analysis of the method that work was being done by. So it would analyse each component of the job, the task that was being done, into how long it took, and trying to make sure that there were no redundant parts in the method. Mass production followed, where there was high volume production of a standardised product for a mass market. And this was followed in the 80s and 90s by the quality revolution, where an emphasis was placed on quality and the strategic role of operations in delivering quality for these high volume products and services. And in the 1990s and into this century, lean production, where waste is eliminated and products and services are delivered using just-in-time methods and so on. So it's the adaptation of mass production that prizes quality and flexibility in its operation. This slide shows some of the important era and some of the important players who developed operations and supply chain management. These are covered in the textbook. I don't want to spend too much time rehearsing the history, but essentially this slide shows some of the developments leading up to and just after the Second World War. Much of the Industrial Revolution led to the scientific study of the principles of scientific management and the way in which work was done. And the ultimate implementation of that was by Henry Ford, where instead of people moving around the product staying still, shifted to the product moving and people staying still in assembly lines. The Human Relations School was a reaction to some of that early work, which essentially ignored the impact of human beings on the operation, and studies by Elton Mayo and some theories developed by Maslow, Herzberg and McGregor led to a greater understanding of the way in which work and people interacted. The Operations Research School grew out of some of the activities in the Second World War, some of the logistics activities of getting the right people and machinery and equipment into the right place at the right time. And some of the techniques are given there: linear programming, simulation, queuing theory, decision theory, some of the program evaluation and review techniques, critical paths, and so on. Were developed in the 1960s and 1970s. Post-war, the focus shifted onto quality of products and services, as the quality of these of goods and services, the way in which companies won orders from customers. And this quality revolution was developed through the internet revolution with the creation of the development of digital technologies, the World Wide Web, the internet, to be able to communicate and deliver products and services and manage the distribution of products and services worldwide. So that laid the foundation for globalization of businesses, and this was reflected in the political world through international trade relationships and organizations being created. Since the turn of the century, consumer concern has turned to the impact that their purchases have on things like global warming and climate change, and the companies have been much more concerned now about the footprint that they leave, the carbon footprint that they leave, and the social responsibility that companies have to the rest of society by not damaging the environment for the future. The digital revolution itself has moved on, and now we have, and some would argue, too much information, too much data. It's impossible to analyse, but developments, theoretical developments in terms of big data, the Internet of Things, managing the way in which products have moved around the world, and 3D printing, all have been disruptive to the way in which businesses operate today.